Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Schubert. I'm your host, and this is another episode of the independent film focus series. Today, we look at Sharp Corner, directed by Jason Buxton. Sharp Corner tells the story of a man who is obsessed with saving people's lives who get into car accidents on the corner near his house. What happens afterwards is ambiguous, to say the least. This is a thriller that I absolutely adored. It's definitely one of my favorite films of the year. And luckily, I got to chat to the man who made it, Jason Buxton. I'm really excited to chat to him about this film and about working with Ben Foster and Kobe Smulders and a terrific cast, and a film that just, like I said, you didn't really know what to think. And I love films like that when it's done well. And this was definitely one of those films. So please enjoy my conversation with Jason. It is out at the end of this week in North America in limited theaters, and I will keep you all updated on the VOD release as well, because this is definitely one that's worth seeing in a theater, and maybe a small intimate theater in one of your local community cinemas. I just loved it, and I had a really fun time with it. So without much further ado, here's my conversation with Jason Buxton, the director of Sharp Corner. And now I'm incredibly pleased to welcome the director of Sharp Corner, Jason Buxton. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Well, pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you as well. I watched the film and I really, really loved it. It was wonderfully ambiguous and open to interpretation. And I loved the set pieces and the performances, and it was just really well done. So first off, I'd love to say that to you.
Thank you.
I'd love to ask, when it comes to this film, I think one of my favorite things about it is how open to interpretation it is. So I guess one of my first questions to you would be, when you set out making this film, was that something you had planned, or was that something that sort of, as you were making the film, you realized that this is a much more ambiguous film than maybe you set out to make?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more ambiguous than I had set out to make, because it's so much so much about his internal conflict that I think it just sort of leans in that direction. And then what Ben Foster does with the character adds another layer of ambiguity, and I love it. I love what he did with it because it creates such mystery. You see him processing information. You see it in his eyes, which is, I think, what makes him so watchable as a performer, because something's going on. And I think the effect is that it invites the audience to lean in, to pay closer attention, to find those clues that, like, what is this guy? What's going on with this guy? And as the character sort of evolves, as his desires evolve, it just keeps people, I think, engaged, trying to sort out. It becomes a bit of a mystery, a bit of a suspense thriller with dark comedy sort of laced in there as well.
There were a few moments where I was laughing, and I'm just thinking to myself, why am I laughing at this moment? But I think that's what makes this film wonderful. It switches tones a lot, but there's a consistency throughout. And I think Ben does a wonderful job. I almost wanted to hear his internal monologue, but his face does so much of the acting for him. And I think this was definitely one of the weirder performances I've seen from him, but I really liked that.
Yeah, well, a big influence for Ben is the De Niro character in The King of Comedy, Rupert Pupkin. That's a performance for the ages for Ben, and I think he had that role in mind a little bit, and I think he wanted to bring some of that into this. But we also wanted to keep it somewhat grounded and somewhat very deadpan for me. Like, I didn't want to play the humor. I wanted it to sort of be on that line between, the suspense and the thriller aspects, and then this sort of slight deadpan satiric nature of the film, and sort of right in those tones. But I always saw the film that way, and I knew it was a tricky one to land because, when you make a movie, you have to get everybody, not just your performers, but all of your key creative collaborators all have to be working on the same movie in order to see something through successfully. And so it's tricky. It's a tricky balance to communicate that tone and then to get everybody sort of playing, in the same sort of arena. to make that
Yeah,
happen.
I think one of the scenes that really stands out to me is near the start, and you talk about this deadpan and not sort of playing up the comedy, but I think when the first car crash happens and you sort of learn about this house and the two main characters, Ben and Kobe, are making love, and then it just the wheel comes through the window, and I was laughing a little too hard, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible situation, but it's kind of funny because we see Ben just standing there looking shocked in a state of undress. So I think you did a really good job with that. You mentioned the King of Comedy. One other film that came to my mind, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it was The Gift. It was Jason Bateman's directorial debut. Joel Edgerton was kind of the stranger character in it, and it was played in a very similar way where there was a lot of deadpan comedy, and you're just constantly trying to figure out who this character is. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your process with Ben in how you wanted the audience to discover who he is, because there's many different interpretations. You could think that he's just a weird individual. You could think that he's a sociopath. You could think that he's a hero. I think I really love that about the film.
Yeah, I think for me, I wanted both Ben's characters and Kobe's characters' perspectives to be sound perspectives, to be perspectives that, oh, I understand why Rachel, Kobe's character, wants to protect her son and leave this place. And I also understand Josh, Ben's character's desire to be there, assist people. So it was important for me that we could both sort of sympathize and understand each of those characters' perspectives, and they sort of become at odds with each other. But I think, yeah, with Ben, working with Ben, we're both like to talk, ask questions, and we like to talk about the characters and the themes and, sort of the inner life of, sort of, midlife malaise, I guess. And so a lot of it was not direct. A lot of it was, somewhat philosophical in terms of just talking about this kind of masculinity, and that, yeah, it was a really nice collaboration in that way where I think he had the space and I also had the space to, we trusted each other to, to shape not just that performance, but the film. And, obviously he's in every scene. So it's the most important collaboration in the film.
And I was also really impressed by the psychology behind the film, because my partner, she took psychology in university and is doing a post grad now, and she would make like little comments to me, and then a few seconds later, the character, whether it be the couples therapist or the child therapist on screen, would say the exact same thing later on. So how important was it, considering Rachel, Kobe's character, was a therapist, and therapy seemed to be a common theme throughout the film? How important was it to get that aspect of the film right for you?
It was important for sure. I mean, I think if I wasn't a filmmaker, I'd probably be a therapist. I'm very interested in psychology and psychoanalysis. I read a lot of Jung, not just Jung, but some of the modern writers, Jungian writers. And so I always sort of brought that stuff into my filmmaking because this is like an elevated genre film, but it's also like, for me, it's rooted in deep character and so for me, like Kobe's character being a therapist, but she also doesn't want to be her husband's therapist. She wants him to take responsibility for his own life, and she doesn't want to provide therapeutic services for him. She wants him to look at himself, and ultimately he ends up feeling compelled to seek therapy. And that scene for me was the only opportunity for us, the audience, to really sort of see under the hood of Ben's character. And so it sort of became this opportunity to, to give the audience a little bit more than I was purposefully holding back and not wanting to go into, too much detail with what's going on inside his head. But that scene in particular gives us the chance to sort of see under the hood of this guy who's, he's not sophisticated in terms of him understanding himself. He doesn't, I've said this a lot in interviews, he doesn't live an examined life. And what happens to him is the consequence of not really truly understanding himself and what some of his motivations are.
And I thought that was really well done as well, because you sort of learn throughout the movie that he might have something akin to an obsessive compulsive disorder, and him wanting to save these people and believing that he can is sort of almost that dopamine hit. And I won't spoil the ending because I do think people should go watch this movie in theaters or when it comes out on video on demand. But him getting that sort of hit of dopamine that really sets him at ease when it ruined his life and given his life no meaning. I thought that was just wonderfully done in the end, and I really appreciated how we learned about his character and more until the climax of the film.
Oh, thanks.
You mentioned the King of Comedy, but were there any other films that inspired your process behind the film? King of Comedy inspired Ben a little bit, but were there any films that you kind of looked at when you were making this film or before, or was this something you wanted to really individualize?
I think when I was writing it, there were a few influences, one being Todd Field's Little Children, which was a film from the mid 2000s, and with Kate Winslet and Patrick Wilson and Jennifer Connelly. And A Taxi Driver is a strong influence for me. I think that the parallels are somewhat apparent with that one. King of Comedy was a film that I really appreciated, and it actually was a little bit of an influence when I was writing the screenplay. But that was more sort of coming from Ben's side of things. That was, which is interesting because it's kind of a companion piece. I mean, it's Taxi Driver, obviously the same director, same actor. So there's some definite crossover in terms of thematic material between those two films. And then when I was gearing up for production, I looked at No Country for Old Men a lot. But a lot of these influences aren't necessarily that apparent in the film because this is a very different film, obviously, than No Country for Old Men. But I would say what the Coens do so incredibly well is they can pivot so quickly tonally. You have these moments of where characters are embellished, the acting is sort of becomes a little bit more heightened, and then some more sort of straightforward dramatic moments. No Country for Old Men is a good example of that. So that was an influence for me.
Sure. I guess one of my final questions for you is you're a Canadian director from Nova Scotia. I understand that the film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, a festival that I love. How great was it to introduce this film first there and see the reaction from audiences?
It was great. I mean, TIFF was the place that I premiered my first film as well. So it's a great
Special
launch.
place.
Yeah, it's a great launching pad. One of the top festivals in North America, that in Sundance. So depends on the time of year that you're ready to release your movie. And I think, TIFF made sense for us on this one.
Well, before I let you go, the final question I have is I like to ask everyone this. If there's a movie that you could recommend to the audience, I like giving film recommendations all the time, but I love hearing film recommendations. You've given us a bunch of good ones if people haven't seen them, but is there something that you've watched recently that you think should be watched besides Sharp Corner, of course?
I recently rewatched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Which is, as it happens, turns 50 this year.
Oh, wow.
A remarkable film.
So
I recommend that one. Sort of more obscure film that maybe people haven't seen is a French film from the 50s called The Wages of Fear. That's a film that I highly recommend. It's got a long setup. It's about 45 minutes, but then it becomes sort of the most intense film experience I've ever had. This is a very incredible, tense film, which was actually remade by William Friedkin in the 70s, a movie called Sorcerer, which is also a very good film.
Really? Okay. Well, I have not seen that film, so I will be watching it. And I really enjoyed Sharp Corner. I implore everyone to watch that if it's local or once it comes out on VOD. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Daniel.
So thank you so much for listening to my episode with Jason. I hope you enjoyed our chat. I really did enjoy chatting with him about the film. Congrats again to Jason and the whole team. It was really wonderful to watch. But for everyone else, if you do get a chance, definitely check this out in theaters. I do think it's worth the price of admission. And if Mason was here, I would say this is one you would run to the theaters for. It's different, it's unique, and a super wonderfully done psychological thriller. And those are rarer now, I think. I mentioned The Gift in the podcast with Jason, and I do think that is the one film that I've seen that kind of compares in terms of twists and turns and making you think. And I really did enjoy this film, so I do implore you to run to your local theater if it's playing, and if not, just definitely check it out when it comes out on VOD. For everyone else, thank you so much for listening again. I always appreciate all the listens we get, and I hope you did enjoy my interview with Jason. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're there, and if we're not, please tell me, leave a comment on Spotify or somewhere else, just so I know, and I will get it up there as well. But until next time, we'll see you at the movies. Bye, y'all.